So let's take a look at criteria. So the criteria start with the application segment or the segment groups. Those are logically ORed together. When we look at the SAML and SCIM attributes, we may have SAML attributes, SCIM attributes, or SCIM group attributes. Those can be logically ORed together or ANDed together, depending if you want to make these things more specific or more congruent. Then we have client types. Those are ORed together. Client connector or web browser or cloud browser. The client connector posture profiles, those can either be ORed together or ANDed together to make multiple posture profiles apply for a rule. We'll make a decision they have to be verified or if a verification failed. And then the client connector trusted networks. Again, you might select multiple trusted networks which are ORed together. So each of those criteria, the segments, the SAML and SCIM attributes, the client types, the posture profiles, and the trusted networks are then ANDed together to make that rule trigger. Within the access policy, we're either going to allow or deny a transaction. And as part of that, we may also make a decision to specifically change which app connectors are going to be used for a transaction. An example of this, we might identify users as being in China and specifically want to use the China app connectors, where everywhere else in the world we'd use the most suitable connector that's available. So with access policy, we can make criteria based on applications, the client connector posture profiles, the trusted networks, the client types, the cloud connector groups if we're using cloud connector or machine groups, those are the forwarding mechanisms, and then the SAML and SCIM attributes. The timeout policy triggers when the user should re-authenticate. So this is based upon business reasons. For certain applications, we might want a more frequent authentication interval. The idle timeout makes a decision if we haven't seen any packets for an amount of time for a transaction, should we consider it idle and terminate the connection. The criteria for a timeout policy are the application names or the application segments or segment groups, the client connector posture profiles, the client types, and then SCIM and SAML attributes. Cloud connector and machine tunnels do not support re-authentication timer, so they're excluded as criteria from this rule type. In the client forwarding policy, which makes the decisions, should the client connector download these segments? And then you can make a policy decision based on specific criteria, the applications, the client connector profiles, the trusted networks, the client types, those machine groups, cloud connector groups, or the SAML and SCIM attributes, and make explicit rules for either forwarding or bypassing ZPA. Or you can make the decision simple and say only forward allowed applications. So the access policy is evaluated and only applications which are allowed access are then downloaded as part of the client forwarding policy. The isolation policy is restricted to client types being the web browser. You can then create criteria based on any of the other attributes, and you select the isolation profile that's going to be used when the rule triggers for allow inspection. So you then select the isolation profile that's going to be used if the action trigger says allow isolation.
App protection policy rules allow you to set up app protection controls for ZPA web applications. App protection policies work similarly to access policies. You can reuse an existing access policy's criteria to create an app protection policy. App protection policy rules enhance your experience by enabling you to create a policy to inspect traffic to internal web applications based on specific criteria, application segments, client connector posture profiles, and SAML and SCIM attributes. Apply a previously created app protection profile to a policy with the default actions: allow, block, or redirect, set for each related app protection control.